Okay, so I'm back at it. I am going to continue. Well, I guess at this point, I'm at a stage where I've fully integrated PHP's reflector classes into my discovery code, but now the code that I use to parse and discover tests is a bit of a mess. So I think what I'm going to do today is basically walk through that whole file or step through it and just clean up the code. There's a lot of there's a couple fix me's in there and just a lot of duplication and it's just sort of degraded over time as I've refactored things and changed things. So that's the plan for today. I don't necessarily have a ton of time, so this is one of those things where I feel like you don't know if you're at the top of a water slide or down at the bottom of Mount Everest. So hopefully we won't run into too many landmines, but you never know, which I guess is what makes code fun and exciting. The thing that you think is going to take you 5 minutes takes you 5 days, and the thing that you think is going to take you 5 days takes you 5 minutes. So who knows what's about to happen. But hopefully I'll get that done today, and then as far as I know, I'll pretty much be done with everything I want to do for parsing and discovering tests. There's a couple small little to-dos I want to take care of, but it shouldn't have major implications to the code base. But I think that part of the framework can basically be, you can put a bow on it, I guess. There are a couple things I do want to take a look at first. So where's the best place to do this? Let's look in Discover here. Actually, and this was in the initialize or instantiate. Oh, no. If I'm instantiating, that was in the runner. So I spent quite a bit of time debugging yesterday because I am passing in a reflection class into this function here where the whole point is to just instantiate the class and then capture any errors and log them and then return, if we succeeded, return the instantiated class. If we haven't, then just return null, and then the calling code deals with that appropriately. But meanwhile, we'll have logged whatever error has happened. And so I was troubleshooting for a while because this used to be just a string, and so basically I was instantiating the class using the name of the class instead of a reflection class. And so here then, class was just a string, and I was passing it into log error, and that was fine. But now that this switched to a reflection class, I was passing a reflection class into here, and it was making some of my tests fail. And so I've been giving PHPStan a hard time through this process that it's allowing me to do string operations with these reflector classes without giving me any sort of grief about it. But then I'll use them in some other context where it obviously knows it's a reflector class, and it's throwing me errors. So there was just an inconsistency there that was frustrating. But then it dawned on me, yep, that's what we want. All these reflection classes have, if I'm not gravely mistaken, a toString method. So I can't really blame PHPStan here because this is the class basically telling PHPStan, hey, this class can be usefully used in a string context. So if it gets passed in a string context, then use it as a string. And I guess this is a little bit exacerbated by the fact that since I am trying to be backwards compatible to PHP 5.3, I both don't have scalar type hints in my code, nor do I have use strict, I believe is the little declare. I suppose I could throw that in there, but since I don't have scalar type hints going, it doesn't really add much because that's the whole point of that declare flag, I guess, is to tell the engine how to enforce scalar type hints. So basically, there's just a silent conversion to a string because this class provides a toString method. And I suppose, so like I said, I can't really get angry at PHPStan for that, even though I've been blaming it for all of that, because it's doing exactly what the class says it's doing. But I guess then there's sort of the issue of whether there's an actual useful conversion going on there. So oops. Yeah, I keep forgetting eval wants to be helpful and throw things into whatever I'm typing. So this is what casting reflection class to a string looks like. And maybe it's just me not being very smart, but this doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, especially this stuff here. But I suppose I actually shouldn't be too angry about that, because the fact that this is, at least in my opinion, a completely non-useful string, it made debugging this a little bit easier, because it was pretty obvious some string was being, or some class was being cast to a string. So, I don't know, if somebody knows why this would ever be useful, I'd be interested in hearing what that reason is. Because I guess maybe I'm just optimizing for my own personal use case. I would have much rather preferred some error being thrown, or an analyzer, a static analyzer, being able to tell me, hey, that's not a string, don't use it as a string. So just something, I guess, worth pointing out. I can cross that little comment off my list. Another thing I noticed yesterday as well, oh, this is a test, is I have these little helper functions in my test suite to manually build up the various test classes that the framework uses to keep track of all the discovered test information. And I made this comment yesterday, but I didn't really think too much about it. Right, I've just spent the last 5 streams or so, oops, changing all this to be reflection functions. And here I'm just setting this to a string, which is fine because I'm not running static analysis on my test suite, so there's no reason PHPStan would find this. But I guess what strikes me as a little bit weird, or what's surprising me, is the actual code base assumes this is a reflection function, and I assume we're doing something with that requires it to be a reflection function, but nothing is obviously failing. So I guess it's possible, in the context that I'm actually using this function, I'm never actually specifying a setup. So I guess I can just dummy check that. So that would be why. Okay. And I believe this is also happening when I a class test, right? I think the same thing is going on here. Yeah. Because I've done the same thing with class test here, right? These are supposed to be reflection methods. So I suppose Let's just do this. Back, tear down. So the fact that I'm outputting here should at least be showing up in my test output. Yeah, so I guess I am never, whenever I'm calling this, I'm never actually specifying a setup or teardown function. So let's just, I guess, and I can't remember. What the constructor is. I think I need to give it a class name. Yeah, so where is the class name coming from? I guess just spec class. So it is object or method. Well, let's just see if this has any counter increment. Okay, so this is going to be spec class spec setup. Class. So I think that should work. And then this is going to be so I'll just fix this now to prevent any head scratching surprises in the future. Although I suppose there are more lurking around in my code base. So let me just make sure I didn't change anything I didn't mean to change here. So that all seems good to me. Just enough letters. Fix instantiating, of course, did I spell this right? Instantiating whatever. I'm probably going to end up squishing this commit anyway. Okay, so that scratches that off. Where are we here? So now I also realized yesterday I have this stale stash sitting around, which that probably means it's just something I could drop. But I'm going to be bold here and see what this is on stream without even looking at it. So, but I am going to check out just a new branch, and I guess I'll call that the junk closet. I think I spelled closet right. Oh, okay, I know what this was. I think I was getting ready to... Oh yeah, I was screwing around with better handling of run IDs. Okay, so how can I just... Can I just hit restore? Okay, I know that's... Okay, I feel like that was a lot harder than it needed to be. So let's just drop this stash, and then I won't have any future panic attacks about what this random stash code in here. I don't know. It's a nice feature to just be able to stash stuff and then look at something else. But if you forget you've done something and you like move on, you just have random code sitting there. So am I? I'm totally flaking out on how to delete a branch. Help me, Jit. Jit branch. Oh, it's just D, I guess. We should never feel bad about getting rid of our junk closets. So, already quite a successful stream going on here. I think I'll take a sip of coffee. I may have to turn my fan up to prevent any spontaneous shutdowns of the stream. I've got to keep my little nook here nice and chill. Okay, so where are we here? Oops, not yet. So I guess at this point, I'll just start walking through. Now I think I want to make this attribute yeah, anybody that's spent 5 minutes watching me will know I'm not really using object orientation here. I'm using much more of a procedural style. And so as a result, instead of using objects as sort of as modules, since PHP doesn't really have modules, I just stick everything in a file. But PHP doesn't have, well, like I said, they don't have a module system, so anything that goes in a file is basically just globally visible once you include that file. So I've just been using a personal convention where anything that's supposed to be private to the file or not meant for use outside of that file, I just prefix with an underscore. And then anything that's not prefixed with underscore is actually meant for use outside the file. And then actually I also, with the, whatever you call them, doc blocks, I guess, doc strings, whatever the word is, these little notations here, anything that's actually meant to be used by the client side, basically the actual API of the framework, I flag with API. And it's just hopefully a reminder if somebody goes in there hacking around, i.e. me, I won't just blithely change things if it's an actual client-side API. But otherwise, then everything is pretty much right. Changing this is sort of a warning, hey, other modules in the framework or other files, whatever, may be calling into this because this is like the entry point to this module. So you're probably going to have cascading breakages or whatever. But then everything else in this file that's underscore is basically just, implementation details. So this, all it has to say, this constant here, I'm going to prefix with an underscore because this is just used solely for finding functions, classes, or methods tagged with a test attribute. And then if they are, including those as a test, even if they don't otherwise begin with the word test. So this is a completely private constant that doesn't need to be used outside this file. So just going to prefix that. Okay. So this discovery state is still going to be needed. Right, one thing I did want to do, well, I guess we'll just go in order. before I start distracting myself. So this is basically the entry point to this module where we take in sort of the global state. I'm actually thinking about sort of changing this a little bit. This sort of just started out, the state class here started out as basically just a class I could stick, well, global state in without actually having, you know, like global variables. It just gets passed around to everybody that needs it. But as things have been getting cleaned up, this is almost turning into the test suite. So it may make sense to actually originate this within discover tests here and return that as the actual product of discovering tests. Because what's in here at this point anymore? So test results, postpone tests. I think this is actual values that tests can save. And then a list of all the groups and runs that have been declared. So this is really all just test suite specific stuff. So it may be worth just kind of refactoring that a little bit, but I'm going to leave that alone for the moment. It's a pretty small change other than naming things and then fixing all the broken names. But so anyway, we create the discovery state and then just pass in the logger, and then we start off with a group ID number, which we just hard code to 0 in here, which I don't necessarily feel bad about that being a magic number. That can always be changed. But I think what I do want to do then, because this group, oops, is a little bit of an opaque name, I think I'm going to call this run group ID. And that may just be a little bit more of a semantic, meaningfully semantic name. So let's just start off there. And there's no reason, I guess, not to just take this in order from the bottom up. Oh, okay. So what is target? Target is a run group target. Oops. So that doesn't need to change, I guess. And I probably really mess this up. So that's just an iterator. Parse specifiers. So that's actually me group. I guess I should have looked at this instead of just blithely changing everything. So now I really hammed this up. Well, let's just maybe start there and and then 388. 388. How did I get, well, whatever. Like I ended up on line 500 there, even though I thought 388, so, but obviously I didn't. And then 931. Okay. Group. And then 141. And then 602. I think maybe I'll come back to discover. So 203, 247. Oh, my coffee maker just shut off. Where am I? 256, 338. 357. 393. Okay. That puts us back in Stuffer. So 135. This is going to be run group ID, run group ID. So what does new run group return here? Turns it in. So this is going to be still run group ID. Oops, what did that would be run group ID. That would be run group ID. This will be run group ID. This will also be run group ID. Group ID. Group ID. Group ID. Okay, and this is going to come back here into group ID, group ID, run group ID. I think that'll take care of that. And this is in test targets. Well, I guess I'll just search for group. I think if I just change all that out, that'll be fine. Okay. So I am, since my coffee maker went off, I am going to just go top off my cup. Let me move this over here though. Okay, I'll be back in like under 2 minutes. So I guess I spent a lot of time blabbing there. It's already been, what, a half an hour? Yeah. So I don't know how much of this I'm actually going to get through. Maybe I should have just skipped on streaming, but oh well. I wanted to get a little bit something done today. Okay, so with that sort of inconsequential change out of the way, we can come in here to discover directory. So I just want to assert that the directory separator is at the end of the directory, and that allows us to distinguish directory paths from file paths, since a file name can't have a directory separator in it. So so one of the things I wanted to do, and I kind of started this in a previous stream and then quickly realized it was problematic, but my general sort of pattern in all of this discovery is I sort of set up an input array or input variables where I discover whatever in the directory, right? I discover all the files in that directory. If it's a file, I discover all the tests or functions, well, classes or functions in there. And so I just kind of stuff that stuff in an array. Then I have a validation step where I create, let me see here. Well, this directories are a little bit simpler than the other, but then basically I create like an input array where I stuff everything that I've discovered. Then I have a validation step where as I validate things, I move it to an output array, and then I sort of create the final result here, which in this case will be a directory test. Well, not necessarily. It could also be a run group, I guess, but I have to take a little bit closer look. And then anything that's in the output, because all the output's supposed to be validated, then I just copy it in. So I think what I want to try and do is, instead of having this like 3-step process, just instantiate a directory test and then validate as we go. Now there are some limitations that I encountered, which I may be able to work through at this point. But this run group number that I just got done changing, that needs to be determined before we actually start doing the sub-discovery on any tests that we discover. And to sort of support having that defined in an arbitrary order, basically I need to find all the identifiers, then check to see if there's any setup. If so, then update the run group number and then go ahead with test discovery. So on the file system, this is supporting, right? I don't need to sort all the files that I pull off the file system, because I guess setup would sort before test unless a locale can screw that up. But also, just because files are displayed in alphabetical order on the file system, that's not necessarily how they're retrieved. So I don't necessarily want to add the overhead of sorting all the files in addition to pulling all the files off. So I want to be able to handle a situation where maybe I get all the test files first, and then I get the setup file, which has the information to create a new run group. And then within like a file too, that also supports having the setup functions declared in any sort of arbitrary location in the file. There's not a requirement to say, hey, the setup functions need to be declared first and then the rest of your functions. You can stick them at the bottom and we'll still find it and handle it correctly. But what that means is I can't just immediately start doing discovery on subtests. I have to find all the identifiers, look for any setup, set the run group, set the run group ID to the correct value, and then proceed with sub-discovery. So that's going to make things a little bit trickier than I guess I would have liked, but what can you do? So what I think I need here, I'm just going to set this result to new directory test, and I think I may blow this out here. It's already front and center on my screen there. And then I'm going to set valid equals true. So we're going to assume we're valid unless we find some bug. And then I think I'm going to need a setup file name and just initialize that to null. And like I just got done saying, I am going to need to save off test. So let's do it. Let's do it like that. So I think the other thing I'm also going to do, I'm not sure why Vim thought that was necessary. Because I'll just throw in an explicit check for link, and if it's a link, we'll just continue. But I will maybe keep a to-do in here, a low priority to-do. I don't know if this explicit check is actually necessary. So this is going to be obviously safe. Overkill, if anything. And I'm hoping this is implemented in a reasonable way. Like, I hope this isn't potentially 3 file stats. I hope it stats the file once and then saves that off in the directory iterator class, but who knows? Probably not, because that would be the reasonable thing to do, and it seems like I keep getting tripped up on unreasonable things. Or at least imperfect choices, I suppose. I'm being a little bit uncharitable there. So what we'll do here, I guess, is so if setup file name equals null, then we can set up file name to, I guess it doesn't really matter what we use. In fact, I think I want to use the base name. And then we can do I think this is just called discover directory setup. Let's just find where I use that. And I'm going to have to change the signature. So I'm going to pass in the state. Actually, I want to set valid to that. So I'm going to pass in the state, the logger. Oops. We'll pass in the result, and then we'll pass in the path name. And do that. Otherwise, valid is going to be false, and we're going to want to log an error. So log error source. So source is going to be the directory, which what do we call? Path. I wonder if I should change that. I don't know. I suppose I'm just getting hung up on. So the source is going to be, what did I just say that was? Path? Yes, path. Let's just, you know what, create a message here, equals found multiple directory setup files. And this is going to be setup file name and the base name. I think that's probably the best message. So we're saying in this directory, found multiple directory setup files. And then we just give the names of the two files. So it'll be, it'll be whatever the file we initially found was, and then whatever this new file. Because I'm doing a case-insensitive search here, so I need to handle cases where case-sensitive file systems might allow for, well, however many permutations of setup capitalized and non-capitalized are. Which hopefully that won't happen, but it could. So let me take a quick look at this. Setup file name equals base name. So we'll have said we now have found one. I can delete this line. And then the way I'm doing this is I want to do handle directory setup, or I want to do discovery on the directory setup, regardless, I think, of whether we're in a currently valid state or not. So if this ends up failing, we'll flip valid to false. And then due to the short circuiting of the Boolean operators, whatever valid currently was will just be ignored. Or if this is true, right, if directory setup went fine, then it will set valid to whatever valid currently is, which could be either true or false. So I think that's probably the better way to do it, because even if valid ends up being false, well, two reasons I like this. First, this optimizes for the non-error condition, because we just get discovery out of the way. We don't need to do it later. And it also will find more errors, right? Because if we have some sort of weirdness going on in the file system here, we'll flag all those. And I'm actually not even sure what else could be going wrong here, but as we continue to go through this, we'll find out. So we'll flag all those, and if there's anything wrong in a setup file, then we'll also flag those. So let's go back to tests here. So that handles the case of setup file. And in this case, I think I don't need this constant anymore. I'm just going to set this to true. And then, so if this is a file, we just save the file. So if there's a file name that begins with test and has a PHP file extension, we save that test off with true. And in this case, instead of setting true, we'll just set this to false. And I wonder if I should assert I'm just going to assert that we don't already end. In a directory separator, which I feel like I've never really seen that, but the time you don't check is when everything goes haywire. So now this is already done, so we can delete that. I think I've decided I'm going to log an error. Like there's technically nothing wrong with creating a test directory with no tests in it, but if you wanted to put tests in there, then you should, and if you don't need that directory, just delete the directory. But I think I'm just going to leave that for now. Now here is where we do directory setup. Oh, you know what I need to set here? Okay, so I need to start initializing this. So let's set valid true there. Result name is going to equal this path. Result, oops, run group ID is going to equal run group ID. Setup and teardown are going to be set by, I don't know, let's just move that down there. So now, because we're passing in the directory test directly, this function can just set up teardown in this new run group ID explicitly. What am I doing with runs here? Yeah, okay. So this is where this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because we need to save any runs that get discovered. We need to save off, and that is what this class here is doing. because we don't actually save those in a directory test. We actually construct a this test run group, which then holds all the runs, and then each test run holds the tests in there, which could either be a directory test or a file test. So creating these test runs basically creates this artificial, virtual hierarchy in the test hierarchy that we don't actually save in directory tests. So how do I want to handle that? Um, so let me just see what I do here. So previously I was instantiating this class and then, or no, I wasn't instantiating it. It was getting returned by discover directory setup. And if everything was okay, or if it failed, this returned null. And then in here, I was holding whatever the discovered setup, teardown, and runs were discovered. So that might still be the cleanest way to do that. Well, let me just keep stepping through here. So then we create the directory test, we set the path, we set the group ID, we copy the setup and teardown function over from the fixture. Then, if it turns out we have also declared some runs, then we generate or we update the run group ID. Then we go through each test and discover those. And then depending on, so just because we discovered all these directories and files doesn't mean those are all correct. So we iterate through all the tests, do any discovery on there. If we get any tests back, then we check again to see if we have any runs, and we create this test run group and use that as the result. Now, one interesting thing I'm noting here, we don't have an else. Well, anyway, we'll come back to that. So I guess I'll just basically keep this the same. So valid equals true or null. Yeah, valid equals true, setup file name equals null, fixture equals null. Discover oh. So let's do the same thing here. Fixture equals, so we'll just actually keep this the same. Discovered the state, the logger. We don't need the result anymore. So I guess we'll do valid equals fixture and valid. Okay. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. So now at this point, I think I'll stick this down here. So if we're valid, because now we've got setup and teardown in this directory fixture. So if valid, if fixture, then setup, teardown, and if fixture.runs, then result run group ID is going to be new run group. Then for each as name is file, if no, it's file. We'll just flip these around. Get rid of that. Then discover file, state, logger, name. And then run. And then if test. So if we have then at this point any directory tests, oh yeah, then we create this new run group. Where are we here? That's going to be the directory name. Wait a second, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Result. So instead of setting this to result right away, run group, and run group path equals directory name. Oops. Run group. Why is this? Oh. Tests equals, okay. Right, then we need to create these afterwards, so we just set test run here. So run group, so what are we doing? We're saying run group. And then we'll say result equals run group. And this is not directory anymore. Don't need to do that. And if we don't have any tests, we'll just nuke all of that. You know what? As long as they're sitting here, there, this is going to be what? Half. No tests were found. Okay. Two. So I wonder if there's a way I can So since I am setting directory here, right, that's all going to be a reference. So I think I can, so what I want to do is, okay. We'll set result equals null here. If valid, if we have a fixture, then directory setup, directory teardown. This is going to be a new run group ID. And then where do I test for runs again? Then we'll create we'll do this. So if so we'll set directory setup and teardown if we have runs, then we'll create our new run group ID, set that to the directory. Then we'll create the run group. Set the path, set the tests, then for each run in the directory fixture. And I kind of wonder if we can just take care of this in directory setup so that, well, what do we need to do here? Yeah, we need to copy, I don't know, but we'll deal with that later. So that's going to be directory. So if we don't have any runs, then the result is just going to be directory. Also, else result equals directory. I don't know, maybe there's a little bit cleaner. This is going to be directory. That's going to be directory. Test. This is also going to be directory. If directory tests. Then result, or I guess we'll do that. So that avoids these, I believe. So let me just step through this. So if we're valid and we have a fixture, then we'll set directory setup and teardown from that fixture. And then if we have runs, we'll create a new run group ID. We're basically going to set the result to this run group. We copy the path and the tests of the run group out of directory, and then we walk through each run and also update that. Yep, the Blue Angels are back. Then we iterate through each test that we found. And if it's a file, we discover that file. If it's a directory, we discover that directory. If we get a valid test back, then we set that in directory. Then if we have any tests, then we either have a run group set the result, or we set the directory. Although I'm not sure, okay. I'm not sure, I could be being too clever here because I'm not sure if PHP converts this to a Boolean or sets it to whatever the value, the result of the conditional is. So I think JavaScript, you can do this. Not so sure about PHP. So I may be trying to be too clever here. But anyway, so we will soon find out if I am. Otherwise, we found no tests, and we'll just scrap the result because there's no reason to keep that, which will return. So that seems reasonable. Okay, so I think yep. Not result, I guess. So 4. Oh, this should not be path. This should be path name. All right, couple failures here. And that's because I changed my error message there. So seems like that should be pretty straightforward to fix. Oops. Already at news change. So edit, iterate tests. So if you've read my description, I don't even know if I'm going to talk to anybody. Looks like I am talking to one person. But if you've read about me, I live in Chicago, and this weekend is the Chicago Air and Water Show. And so Blue Angels, which is a U.S. Navy fighter pilot group. I assume they're actual like trained for combat, but they also do, well, air shows. So they're doing their practice runs today and tomorrow, and I live in a high rise, not a skyscraper, but there's jets. I mean, I can look out my window and they're basically at eye level. So, yeah. And as you might be able to hear from the mic, they're also quite loud. Big city, right? Okay, what was I doing here? I guess I was trying to fix tests. Where am I? Test files. I guess this is test logs, error file. I feel like maybe I'm just cheesing this test, but I feel like that is not the error. What is this? Test runner. Resources. What are we testing here? File error, and I guess this is test. So I feel like that should still be logging a skip me, although the test says log an error. Oh no, okay, this is just an addition. So that does seem reasonable to me. Okay. So this is also an event error. That's also the same. I guess that's in root, and the error message is going to be, tests found directory. Still got something failing there. I guess. Whoa, okay. Resources, files, Oh. I didn't need to add that, I just needed to. Okay, and then this is in test logs file. So no tests were found. Oh, this is not output, this is an error. Okay. So I would probably keep going, but I actually have some stuff I need to do. Well, now I guess. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there, and I doubt I'll get back to this tonight, but perhaps tomorrow. And I guess I will. Oh, that's what I was doing. Just do a quick diff here and see. I feel like that was a net win. Perhaps a little bit cleaner. I guess I could. Oops. Oh, I see. I saved the whole line. That's a win. All right. So, like I said, I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm getting buzzed by the planes anyway. But I guess I got one person watching me, so I appreciate you hanging out. If you decide to come back and you have any questions, please feel free to jump into chat or continue lurking. So yeah, when I'm back, I guess I'm not going to see you, but you'll probably see me. And so wherever you are, have a good evening or a good day or good morning. Cheers.